of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit wrote, quote, "We cannot accept former President Trump's claim that a president has unbounded authority to commit crimes that would neutralize the most fundamental check on executive power,
That's a
the
lie.
recognition and implementation of election results."
That's a lie.
The judges went on to write, quote, "Nor can we sanction his apparent contention that the executive has carte blanche to violate the rights of individual citizens to vote and to have their votes count." Trump has vowed to appeal
That's
the ruling,
another lie.
possibly to the Supreme Court. During oral arguments last month, Trump's legal team claimed the former president should have full immunity to do anything, even assassinate political opponents. In a chaotic day on Capitol Hill, the Republican effort to impeach Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas failed after Republicans fell one vote short. Democratic Congressmember Al Green cast the deciding vote while wearing a hospital gown. Green came to the Capitol directly from a hospital where he was recovering from a recent surgery. Republicans are vowing to hold another impeachment vote on Mayorkas, who they accuse of failing to uphold immigration laws at the U.S.-Mexico border.
And yes, he did.
In a second setback for House Speaker Mike Johnson, Republicans also failed to pass a standalone bill to send $17.6 billion in military assistance to Israel. Meanwhile, in the Senate, a bipartisan $118 billion immigration and foreign aid bill appears to be dead after Republican lawmakers revolted against the very bill they had been pushing for. On Tuesday, President Biden accused Donald Trump of blowing up the plan, which included harsh new border measures as well as new military aid for Ukraine, Israel, and allies in the Pacific.
Now, all indications are this bill won't even move forward to the Senate floor. Why? A simple reason. Donald Trump.
Simple reason you're a
Donald
criminal.
Trump thinks it's bad for him.
And Donald Trump
therefore, he
is
doesn't
you are
even know
a criminal
the country
on the
he's
world
not for.
court and the stage.
He'd rather weaponize this issue
You
than
have
actually
murdered
solve
and
it.
killed many
The
people.
ACLU has warned the bipartisan deal would have eviscerated
not
long-standing
go through.
asylum protections
No
and
bill
forced
like
the
that
government to
should pass.
summarily expel people from the southern border without due
fund money
process.
to Israel.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony
invading
Blinken
group
has
of
arrived
people.
in Israel as negotiations continue over a possible
That's no
truce
more
and
than the
hostage
extension
deal
of Biden
that
and
could end
criminality
Israel's assault
that
on
was in our
Gaza,
government
at least
doing for
temporarily.
years.
On Tuesday, Qatar said Hamas had given a, quote, positive response to a proposed deal, but President Biden described Hamas's response as over the top. In its counteroffer, Hamas proposed a three-phased ceasefire over 135 days where Hamas would release all hostages in exchange for Palestinian prisoners. Hamas is also calling for a permanent ceasefire and the withdrawal of Israeli forces from Gaza, demands Israel has so far opposed. As the
Of course
negotiations
not, because
continue,
you
the
want
New
to
York Times
dominate
is
the
reporting
region.
Israel now believes a
These
fifth of the
invaders want
hostages
to
held in
dominate the
Gaza
region, and I can't
may
believe that the
already be
United
dead.
States and creepy Joe
The paper
Biden
cited a confidential
is
Israeli assessment that
completely
is estimated
involved,
at
and
least
it's acting
30
as
of
if
the remaining
it's normal.
136 hostages captured
the
on
part.
October 7th have
But you're
died.
talking about Donald Trump.
Meanwhile, the United Nations is urging Israel to halt plans for a ground invasion of the southern Gaza city of Rafah, warning it will lead to a, quote, large-scale loss of life. Some displaced Palestinians are living in cemeteries in Rafah.
Listen to that.
فالشعب الجبري يجعل في المنطقة هذه اللي هي منطقة.
People were forced to come here to this safe place, which is the cemetery among the dead, which is better than living in residential areas where the houses could collapse over our heads. We come here to live among the dead because of fear and horror.
والله أنا بحسد
I envy the dead people for their current situation. They are dead, but in fact they are alive with God, well provided for. I envy them because they are better than us now. We live every second in horror. Every minute passing we are in horror, pain, torture, suffering and confusion because we don't know when the war will end. It's a very painful situation.
The Israeli newspaper Haaretz has revealed the Israeli military has begun investigating the actions of its own forces during the October 7th Hamas attack. Part of the probe is focused on Kibbutz Be'eri, where an Israeli brigadier general has admitted that he ordered an Israeli tank commander to fire on a home where Hamas fighters were holding Israeli Israelis hostage. Brigadier General Barak Haram told the New York Times that he'd ordered the tank commander to, quote, break in, even at the cost of civilian casualties.
Oh, yeah.
Only 2 of the 15 Israeli hostages
And this is
survived.
normal.
We'll have more on this story later in the
Based
show.
on a lying religion.
The U.S. Department of Education has opened an investigation into Harvard University after a group of Muslim and Palestinian students
Seems like
filed a
people are in
federal
the
civil
Matrix,
rights
Andy.
complaint alleging the school had failed to protect
Seems like
them
we're in the
from
Matrix.
harassment and intimidation. In other education news, 2 students at Northwestern University in Illinois have been criminally charged after they published a mock version of the school's newspaper. The mock paper included a front-page article accusing Northwestern's administration of being complicit in the genocide of Palestinians. The Intercept reports that the students, who are both black, are being charged under a little-known statute written to prevent the Ku Klux Klan from distributing recruitment
see how they're
materials in
reversing
newspapers.
these laws
The students
that
face
belongs
up
to
to
the
a year in
Democrats
prison
and the
and a
Democratic
$2,500 fine.
all together, going back to Forest
In
Lake
election
and
news,
Bradford.
Nikki Haley lost the non-binding Republican presidential primary in Nevada Tuesday, even though Donald Trump was not even on the ballot. Over 60% of Republican primary voters in Nevada selected a box that said none of these candidates. About
There you
30% of voters picked Haley, the
There you
former
go.
South Carolina governor who served as Trump's UN ambassador. On Thursday, Republicans in Nevada will also hold a caucus. Trump is competing in the caucus, but Haley is not. Meanwhile, Joe Biden easily won Nevada's Democratic primary with about 89% of the vote.
Imagine that. A bunch
In
of
other political
retarded
news, the
people
chair
as
of the
well.
Republican National
That's who
Committee,
we wanted
Ronna
with, the ones that
McDaniel,
want to
has
see this
reportedly
country
agreed to
fall
resign
into
after
garbage.
coming under
And
intense
I guess
pressure
the
from Donald
destruction
Trump.
of the Palestinian
McDaniel plans
people
to step down
as
after the
well.
South Carolina primary. Trump is
And a
reportedly
nuclear
pushing
war
for Michael
on the
Whatley,
other side.
the chair of the North Carolina
For the same
Republican
reason.
Party, to become the new head of the RNC. Whatley is a prominent election denier who endorsed Trump's false claims about the 2020 election being stolen.
It was not false.
In California, at least 9 people have died as the state continues to be pummeled with record-breaking rainfall from a deadly atmospheric river storm. Some areas of Southern California recorded over 13 inches of rain in recent days, triggering mass flooding and hundreds of mudslides. This is the actor and filmmaker Deborah Pewitt speaking in Studio City as a river of water flowed down the street.